in our headlines on this Monday afternoon, September 26th. Naval authorities from South Korea and the U.S. are engaged in joint drills at sea starting today that are also the first involving a U.S. aircraft carrier in the region since 2017. The South Korean currency is surrendering significant ground to the US dollar, trading at over 1,421 won during the early Monday morning session. And starting on this Monday, the outdoor mask mandate has been lifted even for large gatherings, including more than 50 people, such as concerts, rallies and sports events in the open air. President Yoon believes North Korea will engage in rampant provocations should China attack Taiwan, making South Korea's response to threats on the peninsula a priority. Remarks to this end were shared during an interview with CNN. Our presidential office correspondent Yoon reports.
There will be increased possibility of provocation by North Korea if China attacks Taiwan. That's according to South Korean President Yoon during an interview with CNN, which aired on Sunday, where he also said South Korea and the U.S. should first deal with the threat coming from the regime when asked whether he would support the U.S. over the defense of Taiwan. The South Korean leader, however, declined to comment on what should be the U.S. priority between the Korean peninsula and Taiwan, saying both issues carry importance. His remarks came on the heels of U.S. President Joe Biden's interview last week, during which he said the U.S. would defend Taiwan from a Chinese attack. While much of the world's attention is concentrated on Ukraine or Taiwan, President Yoon sees North Korea as an imminent threat for the South because of its nuclear threats, noting the need for South Korea and the U.S. to work together to defend global peace and stability. He assessed the bilateral alliance to be growing stronger on the economic and technological fronts. Yoon noted that he has been consistent in his position when it comes to Taiwan Strait when asked about him not meeting U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi early last month during her trip to Seoul that coincided with his week-long vacation in the wake of her Taiwan visit that has angered China. Yoon spoke with Pelosi and her delegation over the phone instead, during which he said they had a productive conversation. During the interview that took place last week on the margins of the UN Assembly, the Prosecutor General turned President prioritized restoring universal values like the rule of law, freedom, and democracy within Korean society, citing them as the reason that he entered politics. He added it's his wish to further advance South Korea's alliance with the U.S. on these issues. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Naval authorities here in South Korea and from the U.S. are hosting joint drills at sea starting today, just a day after North Korea test launched a short-range ballistic missile. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Peunji has more.
South Korean and U.S. naval forces will be conducting a combined exercise for 4 days throughout this week in waters off the east coast of South Korea. It will involve more than 20 ships from the two countries, including the American nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan and its strike group, currently here in South Korea's port city of Busan. The supercarrier can carry around 80 fighter jets and almost 5,000 sailors. This is the first time in 5 years that a U.S. aircraft carrier is in the country for a combined exercise, since late 2017, when North Korea carried out its sixth and most powerful nuclear test. The exercise will also involve South Korea's 7,600-ton guided missile destroyer, ROKS 서해류 성룡, and the 4,400-ton destroyer, ROKS Munmu the Great. A variety of aircraft and fighter jets will also be taking part, including those on the American carrier like FA-18s, as well as surveillance aircraft like the P-3 and P-8. South Korea's F-15Ks and KF-16s and U.S. Apache attack helicopters will also be joining the exercise. The latest drill comes a day after North Korea fired a short-range ballistic missile off its east coast, making it the regime's first missile launch in around 4 months. This was seen as an apparent protest against the planned maritime exercise between Seoul and Washington and the deployment of American aircraft carrier in the region. South Korea's Navy said the drill is a measure of preparation against North Korean threats, as well as to demonstrate the strong alliance between the two allies, while enhancing the interoperability of their naval forces. Peunji, Arirang News.
On the local pandemic front, the outdoor mask mandate has been completely lifted as of this Monday. Previously, large gatherings of over 50 people in the open air, including concerts, rallies and sports events, needed to abide by the mask mandate. Authorities are also looking to remove PCR test requirements for arrivals into the country and to resume in-person visits to care centres. South Korea on this Monday reported 14,168 new COVID-19 infections. There were also 33 additional losses of lives and over 400 patients in critical care. In the foreign exchange market, the South Korean currency has surrendered significant ground to the US dollar. During trade on this Monday, the exchange rate hit 1,431 won against the greenback. Now, this is the weakest the won has been since March 2009, when it topped 1,436 won in the aftermath of the global financial crisis. The recent weakening Korean won comes amid the Federal Reserve's aggressive attempts to curb US inflation, including its rate hike of 75 basis points last week. The benchmark Kospi also opened lower on Monday at 2,260.8 and hit a year low at 1 point during early morning trade. Up next, ordinary consumers here are feeling the pinch of rising prices, and my colleague Arirang was out and about to heed their thoughts. Do take a listen.
네, 평균적으로 외식하면 얼마 정도 드나요?
한 끼당 15,000원 이상은 드는 것 같아요. 보통 서울에서 먹는다 치면은.
그러면은 그 예전이랑 비교해서 조금 많이 올랐다고 느끼시나요?
2배 이상 오른 것 같아요. 커피값이 많이 오른 것 같아요. 어디 앉아서 먹으면 7,000원까지도 비싼 데는 비싸니까 그 정도?
Consumer prices have risen across the board as many complain about the rising prices of dining out. And some citizens say it's making them hesitant to buy groceries.
혹시 어떤 품목이 조금 많이 올랐다고 느끼세요, 장 보시면서?
채소 같은 경우엔 또 좀 여러 차례 장 보다 보면 가격이 오른 걸 좀 느끼지 않나.
근데 김장 시즌도 좀 다가오잖아요.
네네네.
근데 좀 부담이 되실 것 같은데 좀 어떠세요? 좀 양을 줄이거나 하실 계획이 있으신가요?
그냥 담가져 있는 걸로 사 먹거나 그냥 그렇게 하려고 그러거든요. 네, 재료값도 너무 비싸고 그래서.
Inflation affects a lot of people, but there are people who are being seriously impacted by the rising prices, like those in the lower income brackets.
These are the 3 side dishes that will be delivered to lower income households. Nutritious meals like these are costly, and eating healthy is not easy for people in the lower income brackets, especially as consumer prices are skyrocketing.
I have zero income, so I tend to go grocery shopping less than before. I'm conscious of every penny I spend. Prices are soaring, and with no income, it's frightening.
81-year-old Kim Soon-gil has to move out of his house soon, as it's in an area designated for redevelopment. Now having to look for somewhere to live, the consumer price rises are making his situation even more difficult.
There's no financial support from the government. All I'm receiving is my national pension and old age securities.
A Korean Red Cross official says rising prices are also a heavy burden for the organization too.
We cannot reduce the amount of food we provide, but prices of ingredients are soaring. That's why we try to get more donations. But with the rising costs of living, donors tend to be pickier. We are pleading for more help for these people.
Consumer price hikes hit the low-income households the hardest, the people who are already on a tight budget. The government should closely monitor the difficulties they face and take control of the situation. 이래현, 아리랑 뉴스.
Also, this past weekend, government officials and ruling party members sat down to address domestic concerns, including the price of rice and legal efforts to crack down on the crime of stalking. Our political correspondent Lee Kyung-eun has details.
On Sunday, just one day after President Yoon Suk-yeol returned from his trip overseas, high-level officials from the government and the ruling People Power Party got together to tackle a range of pressing issues. One, the price of rice has seen the biggest drop in 45 years due to oversupply.
Despite purchasing 370,000 tons, the prices keep falling, as much as 24.9% on year.
And a decision was made that the government will purchase a total surplus of 450,000 tons of rice until the end of the year, marking the largest purchase of its kind by any South Korean administration. However, the government and the ruling party ruled out mandating the public purchase of surplus rice into law, something pushed by the Liberal Democratic Party, citing fiscal burden and potential side effects on the market. On concerns over stocking, an issue raised by both the rival parties, the government decided to amend the anti-stalking law that went into force just a year ago.
The recent murder case at Sindang Station sparked serious concerns over heinous obsessive crimes such as stalking, and we will be pushing for a related law as the key agenda for this year's assembly.
The proposed amendment includes abolishing a provision waiving punishment for stalkers if that goes against the victim's will. Online stalking will also be subject to punishment, and electronic monitoring devices will be worn by those convicted. In the meantime, the government will push for legislative measures to combat phone scams, like ramping up identification procedures against burner phones. From now on, the ruling party and the government will also be tackling these kinds of urgent issues on a working level in a new pattern for such discussions. Yoon, Arirang News.
On the international front, Russia is pushing ahead with its intentions to formally lay claim on 4 regions seized from Ukraine. Kim Yo-san covers these intentions and also Washington's words of warning against a possible nuclear attack by Moscow on Kyiv.
Russian President Vladimir Putin is likely to address the Federal Assembly that may take place this Friday, where he will formally announce the annexation of occupied territories in Ukraine. According to local media outlets, the chamber might consider on Thursday, quote, a treaty and law on the entrance of new subjects into the Russian Federation. They say the upcoming address may be very similar to events in 2014 when the president delivered a speech to senators, followed by the signing of a treaty on the annexation of Crimea. This comes as Moscow plans to annex occupied Ukrainian territories, where referendums on joining Russia are taking place until Tuesday. Ukraine and Western countries, however, say such referendums are a sham designed to justify their annexation, as well as the ramping up of hostilities with newly drafted troops after recent battlefield losses.
These referenda are an affront to the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity that underpin the international system and that lie at the heart of the United Nations Charter.
Against this backdrop, Washington warned Moscow of, quote, catastrophic consequences if it launches a nuclear attack on Ukraine. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said during a televised interview on Sunday that the U.S. will respond decisively if Russia does resort to nuclear weapons. He further added that the U.S. will continue to support Ukraine in its effort to defend its country and democracy. Washington's warning follows the thinly veiled nuclear threat made by President Putin last week in a speech where he also announced Russia's first wartime military mobilization since World War II. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, in New York last week, on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, 11 countries, including South Korea, sought to strengthen their commitment to creating a secure supply of essential minerals. Arirang shares more on this US-led initiative.
During the 77th United Nations General Assembly last week, a key mineral security partnership meeting was held, presided over by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. There, 11 partner countries, including South Korea, Canada, and Japan, and 8 resource-rich countries, including Brazil, Mongolia, and Zambia, agreed on plans to stabilize and diversify the supply chain of core minerals.
To each of you, both those from the Mineral Security Partnership countries and those from minerals-producing countries. This is, I think, one of those sessions where, as we say, it gets real. This makes a difference, a concrete difference, and we're very anxious to hear, especially from all of you today.
The Minerals Security Partnership, which was launched in June, is a U.S.-led initiative for a multilateral cooperative effort to stably secure the supply chain of core minerals necessary for the transition to clean energy. It plans to invest in developing countries with abundant resources by promoting public and private investment in key mineral supply chains such as rare earth elements and lithium, while strengthening environmental standards.
Critical minerals are at the heart of this transition. They're essential components of the technologies that will power our clean energy future, like electric vehicles and batteries, wind turbines, solar panels.
But the partnership has another major agenda, countering China's dominance. That's because China dominates the supply of lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements, all of which are key materials needed for EV batteries. And it's also the single biggest reason why Western countries are looking to build their own supply chains. The United States plans to continue working with mineral-rich countries over the coming months to determine which projects will benefit most from the Minerals Security Partnership. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Semiconductors are believed to be critical to economic and national security. They also account for almost 20% of South Korea's exports. That being said, efforts are underway to boost related education. My colleague Yoon has this report.
Going to college isn't the #1 goal for these students. Rather, they want to land a job in the country's most promising industry, semiconductors. This is Chungbuk Semiconductor High School, where what's been called the future of Korea is nurtured. In 2010, this high school became a Meister vocational school that aims to train professionals who are masters in a specific industrial field. Here at the Semiconductor High School, there are many labs where students can get on-the-job training and learn how to use high-end machines. Most of these machines cost more than millions of US dollars. Major companies have donated them for students who could be their potential employees to learn. To maximize their experience here, each class only has 20 students. During their first year, students learn the basics, like the specific terminology and how electronic circuits work. In the second year, they learn about the different stages of semiconductor production, from pre-processing and equipment manufacturing to chip design. As seniors, students can choose a specific field and receive practical training.
As the demand of the semiconductor rises nowadays, I found this industry so promising that I decided to go to school. I can learn through a lot of equipment that is used in many semiconductor factories.
This is possible because teachers here share their know-how from working at major semiconductor companies themselves. Thanks to their efforts, more than 9 out of 10 graduates have landed a job in the industry.
For the first 7 years, every single one of our graduates landed a job. The year we had the lowest performance, our graduates' employment rate still hovered above 96%. We try our best to find the strengths and weaknesses of each student and provide appropriate counseling.
I talked to a graduate who said her years at the high school have definitely given her a competitive advantage at her company.
I was able to adjust quicker than my other colleagues because I had already learned how to use the equipment and was familiar with the jargon. Of course, there's still some remaining stigma because I only have a high school diploma. But the industry I chose prioritizes practical experience, which I have.
Semiconductor giants like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix have given the school support and equipment, and in return, get a chance to recruit these global talents before anyone else. Yoon, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. A right-wing coalition is set to take over the Italian government following the country's latest general election. The right-wing alliance, led by the Brothers of Italy party and headed by Giorgia Meloni, looks likely to win a majority of seats in both houses of parliament. This amid a record low turnout with just 63.83% voting, nearly 10% lower than 2018. The result means Italy will likely see its first ever female prime minister, as well as its most right-wing parliament since World War II. According to exit poll figures, Meloni's coalition is set to win between 41 and 45% of the vote, with the opposing centre-left alliance set to grab less than 30% of the vote. A victory by the right-wing coalition could make it harder for Europe to present a united front on the Ukraine war. Despite Meloni's promise to support Western policy on the conflict, her coalition partners have questioned sanctions placed on Moscow. At least one person has been killed and several houses have been washed into sea after Hurricane Fiona made landfall in Canada on Saturday. According to local authorities, a 73-year-old woman in Newfoundland was swept away when part of her home was destroyed by a wave. With wind speeds of up to 170 kilometers per hour, the storm hit Canada's east coast, affecting 5 provinces. At least 8 houses in Newfoundland's Port aux Basques have been swept away and another 20 severely damaged, leaving 200 people in need of shelter. Hundreds of thousands of people were left without electricity across 5 of Canada's provinces since Saturday. The government has sent around 100 troops to help clear the debris so that technicians can restore power. Voters in Cuba headed to the polls on Sunday in a landmark referendum that could turn the tables on the country's machista culture. Known as the Family Code, the government-supported proposal would legalize gay marriage and adoption, allow surrogate pregnancies, and expand non-biological parents' rights. However, it has been met with resistance by Cuba's church communities, with changes made to 25 drafts, following over 79,000 neighborhood meetings and 300,000 public suggestions. There are also concerns over protest voting due to the island nation's worst economic crisis in 30 years. Over 8 million voters are expected to turn out, with a simple majority needed for the proposal to pass. And in our final story, hundreds of paragliders took to the skies above the French Alps over the weekend. They were taking part in the Coup-Icar or Icarus Cup, a 5-day event of aerial acrobatics, hang gliders, paragliders, and hot air balloons. Gliders also competed for the best costume in the E-Carnival, wearing everything from a Top Gun F-14 jet to Queen Elizabeth, and even a duo playing billiards mid-flight. Following 2 years of reduced attendances, the annual paragliding contest made an almost full return, seeing some 90,000 spectators. Held in the village of Saint Hilaire, the Coup-Icar started in the 1970s, with the creative costumes coming 13 years later. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Monday afternoon. As the temperature is soaring quickly in the capital, reaching 26 degrees, gaps in readings are almost double digits. So dress in layers to stay warm from brisk wind on your morning and evening commute. And skies are partly cloudy, but overall the air quality is quite good. And just like in Seoul, temperatures swing for most inland regions, reaching 26 degrees in Chuncheon and 23 in Daegu. Well, it's a lovely day to go outside and have fun, but don't forget to put on your sunscreen. And as the fall foliage is predicted to start from Seoraksan Mountain, thousands of visitors and hikers would flood into mountains to see a beautiful color transition of fall leaves. The foliage is expected to reach its peak in 2 or 3 weeks, but always be extremely careful for wildfires, which usually start at this time of year. And sunny spells should continue for the time being, with late season high temperatures of 28 degrees in the capital tomorrow. And there's a chance of slight rain on Jeju Island and southeast coast on Tuesday. Now, let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
That ends this edition of the Daily Report, but do stay tuned for our daily panel session coming up right after this break. Thank you for now.